Hey everybody, this is Alexander. Welcome back to another episode of the Gallivanting Gourmet. On today's episode, we're going to be doing myths versus reality, the true story behind famous historical myths. History is filled with myths and legends, stories that have captured our imagination for centuries. But how much of what we believe is actually true? Today, we're diving into some of the most famous historical myths and separating the facts from the fiction. Now let's start with the myth of George Washington and that ye old cherry tree. Now, according to legend, a young Georgie confessed to his father, and he said, "Daddy, I cannot tell a lie. I cut down the cherry tree." Now, this story has been told over and over again in America, and it's used to illustrate old Georgie's honesty. But is it true? The answer, Internet, is heck no, it's not true. The cherry tree story was actually invented by a man named Parson Weems. He was George Washington's first biographer after his death in 1799. Weems wanted to create a moral tale emphasizing George Washington's integrity and honesty, but there's no actual historical evidence that this ever happened. Washington wasn't the only figure whose legend has grown beyond reality. Now, let's move on to another misunderstood leader. That is Mr. Napoleon Bonaparte. In reality, Napoleon was around 5'6" or 5'7", which was an average height for a Frenchman of his time. The myth of his height came from a confusion over the French and British measurement systems. And the British propaganda used this to ridicule him as the little corporal. So while Napoleon's height has been exaggerated for propaganda purposes, let's take a look at the image of fierce warriors. Were Vikings really as they were often depicted with horned helmets? When we think of Vikings, we imagine fierce raiders wearing horned helmets, but that image is largely a 19th century fabrication. There's no archaeological evidence supporting the idea that Vikings wore horned helmets. This image became popular during the 1800s thanks largely to Wagnerian operas and then later in the 20th century Hollywood movies. In reality, Viking helmets were simpler, more prosaic. They were designed for combat effectiveness, not with theatrics in mind. Now that we've debunked the horned helmet, let's turn our attention to a controversial story about the Middle Ages. Did people really believe the Earth was flat? Contrary to popular belief, educated people in the Middle Ages did not think the Earth was flat. Though this myth has persisted, the idea of a spherical Earth has been known since the ancient Greeks. By the Middle Ages, scholars like Thomas Aquinas and many navigators understood the Earth was round. The flat Earth myth was perpetuated in the 19th century, often to paint the medieval church as ignorant. With the flat Earth myth debunked, let's journey to the American West and find out if cowboys were really the lawless gunslingers we often see in movies. Hollywood has painted the Wild West as a place full of constant gunfights and lawless gunslingers. But how true is this depiction? While there were some famous shootouts like the gunfight at the OK Corral, they were far from common. Most frontier towns had laws prohibiting the carrying of firearms, and most cowboys were more concerned with cattle drives than they were with duels. From the American West, let's take a quick voyage across the Atlantic to explore a common misconception about the Spanish conquistadors and their encounters with the Aztecs. It's often believed that the Spanish easily defeated the Aztecs due to their technological superiority, like guns and steel armor. But the reality is actually far more complex. The Spanish were vastly outnumbered in the Americas and succeeded largely due to alliances with other indigenous groups and the devastating impact of European diseases, famously like smallpox. Guns and cannons, they did play a role, but they were unreliable and slow. History is filled with fascinating stories, but it's important to separate myth from reality. These myths have shaped our understanding of the past, but by exploring the true stories behind them, we gain a clearer picture of our own history. If you enjoyed learning the truth behind these historical myths, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let's keep exploring and uncovering the real stories of our past. Thank you for watching. I'm Alexander, and we'll see you next time on the Gallivanting Gourmet. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what videos you'd like to see next time.